Hello and welcome back to the channel, and welcome to Instant Deck Techs. In this series we go over everything you need to build a certain commander. We'll go over the strategies and the types of cards needed you need to get the deck working. Any cards we mention will be down in the description below. In this video we're talking about Raffine Scheming Seer. It is white, a blue and a black for a 1/4 legendary creature Sphinx Demon. It has Flying, Ward 1 and whenever you attack, target attacking creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. This means you draw X cards, then discard X cards, and put a +1/+1 counter on that creature for each non-land card discarded this way. This is going to be a looting matters deck with a token subtheme. We're going to want to be drawing and discarding as many cards as possible. To do this, we want to go wide with tokens, so that we can make Raffine connive for as large amount as possible. Before we go into our individual sections, let's quickly go over what the deck is trying to do and importantly, how it wins. The more creatures we attack with, the more we connive with Raffine. To do this, we'll be running some cards that make tokens, and some cheap evasive threats. The combination of these will mean that we can draw and discard as many cards as possible. We'll then weaponize all that card draw and discard by running effects that deal our opponents damage and make us more tokens whenever we do either. So, let's kick off with some token makers. This will make up a decent portion of the deck, which we'll complement with some evasive value creatures a bit later on. First up is cards that make us tokens when we draw cards. Like the discard ones we'll get into in a moment, what's great about these is that they fuel themselves. With these, we make tokens when we draw cards, which gives us more of a board state, which means we connive more with Raffine, which in turn makes more tokens. The tokens that naturally have evasion, such as the Island Walk Squids from Chasm Skulker, or the Flyers from Ethereal Investigator, are probably the standouts. Because we also discard when we connive, we also have cards like Drakehaven, Dying to Serve, and Bone Miser to make us even more tokens that again fuel themselves. Then as well, in these colours there's also plenty of other token makers that you can look at running. If they aren't cards that synergize with the rest of the deck, make sure they do something important, such as giving a large threat in Adeline, or a flying threat with Felisa, or buffing the team up with Hero of Bladehold, or helping to fix our mana with a card like Migratory Route. When it comes to our card draw, there's plenty of different ways that we can take it. First up is cards that draw and discard us cards. These help with the token makers that we've already gone over, while also smoothing out our draws. Special note to Occult Epiphany, as it draws us and discards us cards while also making us flying creatures. We can also run some spells that double the amount of cards that we draw. With these out, when we connive off of Raffine, we'll draw twice as many cards. We'll still only discard the normal amount, meaning we've doubled the amount of cards we're going to keep in our hand. Next up in this section is evasive creatures that draw us cards either when they enter the battlefield or deal damage to a player. The reason we're talking about evasive creatures is that Raffine can buff up any creature we control, not just itself. If we buff up one of these creatures, we'll have a better chance of getting the damage through, while being able to keep our commander back so it doesn't get into trouble. And what goes great with evasive threats is coastal piracy effects, which draw us cards whenever any of our creatures deal combat damage to a player. These can draw us an immense amount of cards very easily, and get even better with the other synergies that we have in the deck. After the card draw, we have some more spells that synergize with the deck, in the form of some cards that limit how bad it is when we discard. Cards like Library of Leng, Containment Construct, and Toulouse all get around the downside of discarding cards, either by putting them on top of our library, letting us play them from the graveyard, or by putting them back into our hand. Then there are also some cards with Madness, that we can cast when we discard them with Connive. You can run some cards like Big Game Hunter in your interaction section, and cards like Grave Scrabbler as some nice recursion. One last card to mention is Wonder, which is a fantastic card to discard, as it can give all of our creatures flying. When it comes to ramp, in these colours there's pretty much one way of going with it, and that is with Mana Rocks. You want to run a solid selection of Talismans, Signets and Diamonds, as this is a 3-colour deck. The only other Mana Rocks I would consider running are Thought Vessel, as it lets us keep some of the cards that we've drawn, and Chromatic Lantern, as it just makes the mana in a 3-colour deck that little bit nicer. When it comes to interaction, you generally want to tailor this to your playgroup. We'll go over some thematic interaction first. With all that discard from Raffine, we have cards like Ruthless Sniper, Feast of Sanity, and especially Archfiend of Ifnir, which can get really out of hand. Nico Aris could also be a nice include in this deck. It can make a value creature unblockable, and then if we have our card draw engine going, that -2 can easily take out a large threat. Then as we're in Esper, we have some of the best bits of interaction out there, so run whatever you have that does a good job of destroying your opponent's threats. Moving over to our protection, because a lot of our engine revolves around our commander, we want to have at least a couple of ways of keeping it around. First up is cheap evasive threats that can also protect our board. What's great about these is that they can also start swinging in. Even cards like Judge's Familiar and Mausoleum Wanderer effectively make Raffine's Ward 1 a Ward 2, which can make all the difference. Then there is also Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots, which will be as solid in this deck as they are in any deck that revolves around the commander. Another way we can get the most out of discarding cards is with some reanimation effects. These will mean we can more easily throw some of our creatures into the bin, as we know we can get them back later. There's some very solid options in these colours, but spells with flashback and creatures with Unearth that brings things back with them will be a step above the others. This is because we can discard them and then still use them from the graveyard. Moving over to our win cons, there are a number of different ways that we can look at winning the game. First up, we have cards like Chueza and Psychosis Crawler. These deal damage whenever we draw cards. Hopefully, you'll be able to see at just how much damage these should be able to deal. We've already mentioned Feast of Sanity, but importantly it and Faith of the Devoted can also go straight to the life total, and it can be a good way of keeping your opponents in check. A different kind of win con is with Sage of the Hours. With Raffine's ability to put +1/+1 counters onto a creature, if we can consistently connive 5 each turn, then with Sage of Hours out, we can take infinite turns. Next up we have some very strong, but more friend-losing win cons. Firstly, with some wheel effects, that make every player discard their hand and draw a new one. These can really mess up your opponent's plans, all while turbocharging ours. When these are combined with spells that limit the amount of cards our opponents can draw a turn, it can be nights out for your opponent, as basically we'll have all the cards and they will have nothing. Generally speaking, it's better to save these kinds of cards for more competitive playgroups. Some last cards to mention, and those are ones like Thassa's Oracle and Jace Wielder of Mysteries. These win us the game when we have no cards in our library. In this build we don't need any fancy combos to get these working. We should be drawing and discarding enough cards throughout the game that we can naturally churn through our deck and win through one of these cards. Rounding off the deck with some utility lands, as with 3 colours there aren't too many that I would look at playing. I do like Cephalid Colosseum in any deck that wants us to be drawing and discarding cards. Reliquary Tower can then help us keep some of those cards we've drawn in our hand, and then Rogue's Passage can guarantee that one of our creatures that we've made massive can swing through for the win. The rest of your mana base will be very dependent on what you have available to you. We've recently released a video with some advice on building a deck with a budget mana base, which might be of help. Until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments if there are any commanders you'd like to see a deck tech on. Thank you very much for watching.